Loss is part of life, right? All right. We want to talk about these changes here? So I guess this is the first time there's going to be a change after the concept of the archetypes. You know, that's like a dirty word on my stream, but we'll just go along with it today. So they talk about that here, and we can breeze over that. I haven't actually read word for word this. I did skim it when it was published. Considering options for non-canon Spotlight Vintage Cube. Gotcha. Okay. So this is like the big one, right? Put a quarter in the archetype jar. Yeah. So Tendrils, Yogwill, is Brain Freeze still here? Okay. I guess this is kind of a misnomer off the bat. We'll see the exact list in the future, but it's saying here that these are gone. Yeah. The reality is, as far as classical Storm goes, it's pretty much a dead deck. Like, it wasn't good enough to keep up with the creature clocks, so you're not, like, these cards leaving doesn't really change much. Uh, these cards leaving. These cards leaving does change a lot, actually. These are really good cards. But you might have to change your perspective on how to use them. Because if you try to use them like you did 3 years ago, you'll probably lose. But Tendrils still remains a powerful card, as does Yawgmoth's Will. So losing them does cut an option from black, right? One of my only decks I actually saved last season was a amazing mono black storm deck. Let me see if I can find the deck list here. Where I put together the combo of Helm of Awakening, Mystic Forge, and Sensei's Divining Top in order to generate a bunch of Storm and then cast Tendrils of Agony off of Rain of Filth and then kill my opponent. It was a very fun league to play. And even though there were some silly misplays over the course of it, it's, those things happen. I'm not the best player in the world, nor am I the best, even close to the best Storm player. I would never get close to saying that. But this was the deck that I built, which used Yogwill and Tendrils, and that's the primary way to win. I think this deck was very good. And it also has additional lines of just Artifact Beatdown. But I basically won every game by Tendrils. So as Shaman points out here, one of the things you can do with Tendrils is play it in your Rakdos decks. I find particularly the combination of Black Lotus, you can do Lines at Diamond if you want to, that'd be the bargain build. But like Black Lotus, Luris, Wheel of Fortune, that's the easy way to win with Tendrils. And with the inclusion of Fire Blast and Mind Collapse, it's really easy to get a lot of free spells, right? Lava Dart was added, I think. So you might begin to ask, like, at what point is Tendrils of Agony? Like, at what storm level is it worth the investment? I think it's 2. Like, if you can Tendrils and drain for 6 for 4 mana, that's a pretty big swing. The card Sorin's Vengeance is a really hateful card. This is a 7 mana card that drains for 10. This card that people kind of laugh at until they've seen it played. This is a very potent finisher. And if you've never cast it, it looks bad, right? It looks like a 7 mana spell that doesn't really affect the board, but draining for 10 is a lot of damage. So you build these decks that, like, you play Jadar, you play Tenacious Underdog, you play Concealing Curtains, you play, like, these cheap dudes, right? You punch in for a little bit of damage, and then you go off one turn and Tendrils for 8. And usually you find a way to win the game from there. It's a really fun deck, or style of deck to play. Only takes 4 lava access. Exactly. I mean, I joke every time I play Uvenwald Oddity, right? Like, inside you there are 5 oddities. You lose one of them right now, you know? There are, like, a certain number of constants in Magic, and 20 life is one of them. It's one of the fundamental constants. I guess that's a stupid sentence. It's one of the fundamentals of Magic is that you start with 20 life, right? So if you can get 6 or 8 life for one card, it's really good. this comes back into Philosophy of Fire, right? So if you're unfamiliar, Philosophy of Fire is a really classic. I think it's an article, but it's a basically way of thinking about the concept of burn in Magic and how much damage is worth a card. Because we so frequently think about card advantage from the perspective of board control or hand size, right? And at what point does a burn spell become card advantage, right? And it's usually like if you can get if looking at burn in modern, usually if you can get one card to do 4 damage, then that's really good, right? If you can get one card to do 6, 8, or 10 damage, that's exceptional. But that deck's going to look different than old Tendrils decks did. So it's just kind of how it is. I think this is a big bummer for a lot of people. This is the reason a lot of people do play Vintage Cube. Um, I could personally, as you can look at my cube. I don't want to speak too much about that in this discussion, but I don't have these two cards. But I do have these two cards. I think there's a world. I think I know there's a world where these can be great cards. Still, but High Tide's not going to really do it anymore. And Turnabout's okay, but it's like not great, right? So this all comes back to other questions about creatures in the cube and things like that. But yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, High Tide all the time. High Tide, I've thought about it recently too. Candelabra is in the cube. I do think keeping Candelabra. Well, I haven't looked at the list. There's some other stuff coming up, but I would have liked to add Empty the Warrens. I think Empty the Warrens is great. Empty for 6 creatures is great. Yeah, the fastball and Rainfield thing. Rainfield definitely was better than I thought it was. So moving on, lands. Um, I guess there's not much to say about this here. I think this was largely disliked. I had a sick Valakut deck last night. I think Field's Dead is just a good card. If this is gone, there's just no reason to play Primeval Titan anymore. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Artifacts here. I have to look at the cuts. But Duretti wasn't a great card anyway, so whatever. Sai is a pretty good card. I think Welder's much better than people think. But again, you have to change your perspective on what you want to weld. It does require a lot of small things. It requires baubles and to a degree like chromatic stars, things like that, for Welder to be exceptional. And then Goblin Engineer, I think is quite cool. I think there's a cool overlap between black and red as it pertains to artifacts, because cards like Sundering Titan and Battlesphere, and there's usually like 3 big artifact creatures, even Wurmcoil Engine, right? Like giving red this really interesting card that is a value engine and also in tune, I think is a very nice hybrid kind of card. So it's never great, but that's fine. It's just the flexibility is very strong. But without looking at exactly what's cut, it's hard to say. Survival and Bazaar are back. We've been playing with Bazaar a lot recently. Dredge is here. It's not really Dredge though, right? Not to be too pedantic about it. But there's no Dredge cards. I guess there's Life from the Loam. Living Death is back. Living Death is kind of busted. I think Hollow One is awful. I have tried so many times to make this card do something. It's just so much work for a free 4/4. Like we were talking at early beginning of the night about Hooting Mandrills and why it's good. And I just said it's a 1-mana 4/4 trample. But the thing about that card compared to Hollow One is that like it's a 1-mana 4/4 trample at any point in the game, not on this specific turn when you're doing something. So I've played with these cards in Vintage Cube over the last 2 years quite a bit. Lots of different variations of my cubes have contained these. Survival, Bizarre, these cards, so on. And in fact, my current cube contains all of these except for Hollow One. And they're good. The question is, in the context of some of the particularly powerful cards in this cube, how good are they going to be? I don't know. Like these cards, Ravager was really good 2 years ago. It's pretty good now, but it's not the best Thread 3 drop. There's a lot of competition. Wayfinder, I think Wayfinder goes undervalued as a way to find Academy. As a way to find Mistress of Workshop. So there is that. This adds a weird avenue of power to green that I think will go underutilized. So then the combination of Wayfinder and Once Upon a Time leads to green artifact decks. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but when your best card is a land that taps for 6 or 7 mana, having cards that find it very quickly is really good. So I don't know. I'd have to see everything that was added, right? I suggested Azorius Flash when I was discussing about possible changes to make to the cube. It's a simple thing. I don't feel the need for another Mana Leak personally, but that's fine. It's not bad. It's just like a simple, easy thing that a lot of people enjoy playing, and I think spell quality is good. Actually, I think it's very good. I think Venser's awful, but that's fine. I love Sigrid for no good reason. I just like it. So that's all I have to say about it. Power matters. This is what I played tonight. This card is power. This card is like green ancestral. I think if you just think about this card on the level of Ancestral Recall, you're probably about right. What other cards did you support Artifact Green? It doesn't even have to really be a green deck. It's like, but the big ones, the big three would be Crop Rotation, Satyr Wayfinder, Once Upon a Time. And then as far as like green artifact cards, you could use the Seeker's Chariot. Other than that, it's probably going to be a bunch of artifacts. Right? But you just have so many ways to find your most important card, which is either Workshop or Academy. Again, if you can find, like those decks are so much better if they have one of those two lands in play, and they're typically pretty bad without them. So green giving you quick access to them makes green very good. Makes green an interesting combination for artifact decks. Lesser used though. I think this Krasis card is cool. I don't know why I would want to play blue in this deck. That's about it. It's a 4/4 trample for 3, which is nice. And then when it attacks, you may have the base power and toughness of another creature become XX, where X is this power. So the idea is you pump it a bunch and then you pump another creature. I think if we watch the gameplay from some of the matches I played tonight, when you cast this card, you win the game. So you don't really need a card like this, especially in one color that's not really going to contribute to this. I don't think this card is bad by any means. I think it's kind of cool, actually. I just don't. I don't know. Oh, Harry's actually kind of hard to kill people with, but it is cool. I've tried to play this card quite a bit. I'm going to keep it in my cube for as long as I can. And I think it's cool to have around. All right, let's go. So individual, did I win? I went 2-1. I got crushed by Alpha's Cauldron. He worked me over with it. We did in match 2 beat, in game 1, opponent reanimated Griselbrand and Atraxa in the same turn. And then I drew Deathseeker, what is it? Deathgreater Champion and Berserk. Oh, that was you? Yeah. Well, let me tell you about that. I won. Card in. Okay, so going over individual changes here. I love this card, Benevolent Bodyguard. 1 mana, 1/1. Sacrifice, target creature gets protection from color of your choice until end of turn. This is interesting with, I get the Soul Cauldron. I don't know if that got added back in. I guess we'll get there. I like this with Lurrus a lot. I think if you wanted to make people's lives a little more exciting, you would cut Mother of Runes and replace it with Benevolent Bodyguard. But that's just me. I think this card is so interesting, Esper Sentinel, because it sucks a lot of the time. But some other times when you're on the draw and they play this turn 1, it's miserable. Because it's miserable for you as the opponent. Because they're just going to, like, you either have to give them infinite cards or just play a turn behind. It depends on the deck you're playing, of course. But I don't know. It's cool. I think this cuts diversity away from white, which is negative. That's all. Eagles the North for Steel Seraph. Seraph is good. There's not much else to say about it. It's not really a necessary card. My feeling at the end of last season, and I didn't play much the last that time I was out for 2 weeks, but I played a good amount the time before the true holiday season, is that any white card that just did damage was totally unnecessary. Because there's so many white cards that are value cards or utility cards that I just had no reason to play anything else. There are some very good players who have an exact opposite perspective, but that's mine. So I felt like in the cube design perspective, there was no reason to have anything that was dedicated towards aggro. White just doesn't need it. Every creature could be 1/1 because they're all 2-for-1s, right? Yeah. I've heard that it was nerfed. I just don't know what was nerfed about it. I never really got that. Well, the thing about Steel Seraph is you can't Resto Angel it, right? That's such a bummer. Just total number of cards? That doesn't matter. I mean, it matters a little, but not much. Okay, I have no feelings about Eagles of the North. I think the Land Cyclers are a little overrated. I think Oliphant and Troll are good. Lorien Revealed is okay. The Ent's okay. They're okay. The black and the red ones are the best. I think the application of Lorien Revealed being a pitch card for their Force of Will is so narrow in Cube that it doesn't really matter that much. Whoa, what? Why are we cutting Treachery? I don't know. I mean, I guess this changes card numbers around, card totals. This is one of Blue's best answers to the board. It's like really old fashioned, but also still ridiculously powerful. I think Ephemerate is close to unplayable. I've tried so many times. But if you have success with it, that's cool. I haven't ever. Every time I put Ephemerate in my deck, I draw it instead of a card that can do something, and I'm just like, I'm never playing this card again. But in the past, my angle on playing the Magic Online Vintage Cube has been pretty narrow. And I really haven't experimented too much with that kind of deck because I never felt the need to. Anyway, this is a bummer for Blue because this is extremely good. Portable Hole out. That's whatever. This card is... I think there's just too much white interaction in general. The problem with white is that there's only like 3 white cards ever, right? There's like Wrath of God, there's Savannah Lions, and then there's Sword Splashers. And then there's just infinite iterations of those cards. And so it's very easy for the white section in a cube to just be 3 cards. And so like, I think it's easy to have too much interaction in white. because there's so few cards in the color in the entirety of the game that do anything else. But this is the interaction change, so that's net neutral on interaction. I think this card is awful. That's all I have to say about that. It serves a purpose. That seems so bad to me. I do feel like the idea of adding artifacts into white as an aggressive thing didn't work in the sense that they just all ended up in Blue Academy decks. Now that's part of like a player knowledge thing, and that like Stoneforge can get Nettle Cyst, but I think there needed to be additional incentives for white to play artifacts and equipment in order for that to truly function. And that could be Pure Steel Paladin, it could be SRAM, it could be any number of things that reward using artifacts in your white deck. But without those there and it just being Stoneforge Mystic, it's not enough to change the way the white player is playing. And as I said earlier, the white player doesn't need to change anything. That's true. I do love, well, first of all, it's 3 and a black instead of a 2 black. But yeah, we're talking about Baleful Mastery. I think that card's awesome. This card says Destroy. Destroy is no good. Gotta be exile. If I'm paying 2 mana for something, it better exile it. I think Guardian Vanilla is good. Did we cut? No. Alright. It says here it's gonna... This is a white discard outlet, which it is. I added Benalia, Hallowblade, and Restoration of Aganja to my cube in order to have discard outlets for Replenish. That's specifically the reason they're in there. They have other applications, just for discarding for reanimation and things like that. But again, because of the way that white works a lot of the time, most people are just going to play these as aggressive 2-drops, which is fine. That's what one of their primary modes. Mentor out for Ranger Captain. I never liked Ranger Captain. It's a card that is in every possible metric good, and it is good, and I always cut it. That's just my experience. One thing I would say is if Cauldron is in, which I don't know if it is or not, I'm not going to spoil it for myself, then this card is more interesting with Cauldron. I do think Mentor is a sick card, actually. Even though I personally get tilted about it. I don't love things that you can like explode on the board in one turn, but this setting is fine. I just always cut Ranger Captain, and then like it's just another card for a deck that has way too many cards. Whereas Monastery Mentor is totally different, right? Again, white needs to have incentives for diversity, and this does not do that. If there are exceptions, if Heliod was in the cube, then you had Heliod, then you use this to fetch Ballista. To read the notes on Ranger Captain. Okay. It is cool with Cauldron, but you could cut Gideon for anything. This is the problem with white. I'm going to say that a lot, I guess. Was that Gideon was in the cube. And that's like an extrapolation, or that's not an extrapolation, that's like a distillation of the problem with white. It's because there's like Hero Blade Hold, Elspeth, Gideon, they're all the same card. And Elspeth's the best one, and even to this, like now Elspeth's great, but you don't even really need it anymore. It's still great. So then if Elspeth is kind of on the outskirts, then Hero is definitely, and then Gideon is definitely. Now, of course, if you have Mana Crypt, if you have Ancient Tomb, these cards are good. But if you want to promote diversity in the white sections of the color pie, then you need to have a different card. So, good that Gideon is gone. Resto is fundamentally a different kind of card than Gideon, right? This is a flash card, so great. This makes your counterspells better. Every flash creature makes every counterspell better. Just as a blanket rule. Lion Sash out for Sun Gold Sentinel. I'd prefer both. This is a better piece of graveyard interaction than Sun Gold Sentinel. I like this card quite a bit, but the graveyard is so deadly in this cube, so I would prefer to have the better one. Wedding Announcement, I think, underperformed in general. It's so slow, and it even wasn't even that good when I flipped. But I like Restorative Nagansho a lot. I like slow grindy white decks. It does a lot of cool stuff, discard stuff for graveyard decks, whatever it may be. Land fixing, you could reasonably play this in some kind of control deck. Leyline Binding out for whereabouts. This is a nerf to white interaction, which is fine. I think this card is kind of crappy, but it's not bad. Chart a course for careful study. When I first built Roast back in, God, what was it? Like March or a year ago, basically. The whole point of it was to have a cube that was very similar to Magic Online Vintage Cube at that point in time, which it's just not anymore. But that's where it started, right? And I cut cards like Treasure Cruise and I don't remember what these other Fact or Fiction, these other kind of mediocre card draw spells. And blue was just pretty bad. And my friend pointed out, as bad as they are, you cut blue's sources of card advantage. So it's dangerous to cut like Chart a Course because it's one of the only card. The card sucks, but it again draws cards, right? So I don't know. Careful Study is cool. In my experience with it, it's not that great. It's cool with Uro more than anything. It's tough for blue to go down in cards. It's really hard. High Tide out for Consider. Consider is just total air, but I have considered it in my own cube recently. Mainly because it's a Surveil more than anything. This cuts a possibility from the cube, and this adds nothing. That. Whether or not High Tide is good, it's a different story. But that's just what this change does. Cryptic Code is exceptionally good, so adding it makes a lot of sense. And Sai is a good blocker, and good source of card advantage, and a good source of board presence. That's fine. Enhanced Surveil. I saw that screenshot of Spike playing a land and surveilling 9. Oh, Exarch is back. I would have a lot of appreciation for Exarch and Pestermite coming back, but no Kiki or Splinter Twin. That would be very funny to me. Emery does suck, sadly. As cool as this card is, it's not good. So that's fine. Get it out. The problem with Exarch is that more free interaction was added to just twin with no cards that works. Yeah, my favorite twin thing was on White Plume Adventure, where you just get to burn through the dungeon in one turn. I don't know. Why are you complaining? I never complain. I just criticize. So Mark is asking about balance versus fun. It's a tough discussion. 2 weeks ago I took the power out of my current cube I've been working on just to try it out, and I liked it a lot less. Part of that's because my current cube is all about manipulating the resource system, and power is fundamental to that. So it felt like the heart was ripped out of it in a sense, because everything that should be acting, it's like there's a whole structure pointing towards something that thing's not there. So I didn't like that. So I've been thinking about fast mana a lot in the last week or two, and obviously it's really the best thing in the game, and it's not particularly fair, and I would say it's not fair, right? And Yet I do think it has some interesting upsides. I think having power present makes being on the draw a little less miserable. In short, if you're on the draw, you're behind in mana. If your opponent has fast mana, you're still behind in mana. It doesn't change the nature of the game. If you're on the draw and you have fast mana, now you can be at parity, and the game can have a divergent path compared to what the scripted path of losing the die roll was. Whether or not, again, that's fair, probably not. But it also, because you do get an extra card, but it does lead towards variety in games, which I think is good. I think there's a tendency to try to maximize fairness and balance, which is a good goal. I think everything should be balanced, but if you, I would prefer a game that's like 5 to 10% out of balance that leads to exciting moments compared to a game that's perfectly in balance that's pretty dry. Ultimately, I want to have a good time, and I'm willing to accept some kinds of unbalance or misbalance. Some kinds really frustrate me, and that's true for everyone. Everyone has the thing that frustrates them. So everyone has their line, I guess. But I particularly find that artifact mana is not that problematic from my experience. What frustrates me, as I've gone off multiple times about, is like Archonic Cruelty on turn 1 or Atraxa on turn 1, because it just makes the game feel stupid. And you might feel the same thing about a Mox on turn 1 or 2, which is reasonable. But I think there's a lot more play to those games than just losing on turn 1 to a combo. So as far as balance is concerned with something like High Tide, whether or not it's good, I do think something should be good enough to 2-1, right? Reasonably. Which is a weird metric to have, but like, is it fun? Yeah. I want the fun thing to at least be winning enough to, like, I don't want to sucker people into losing. That's basically it. Adding Twin back. Twin wasn't great before, and now there's Mind Collapse and Pyrokinesis. So I guess it's worse than it was. And it's not fast. Consistently too. I believe you, Mark. I thought it's not terrible. Test with the Secret out for Forager. I like Forager. This card doesn't do anything, so that's cool. I did lose to it once or twice, but that's fine. Paradoxical outcome out for Fact or Fiction. This is kind of what I was saying earlier. Like, paradoxical outcome is so narrow in what it can do that it doesn't function as a really card advantage card. And if you had multiple pieces of power, it's pretty good. There are ways to make paradoxical outcome good. They were in the cube at one point. They were cut, and paradoxical outcome is still in. And they also got Psi, so I don't know. Thoth is not a good magic card anymore, but it does give you a way for blue to draw cards. So that's good. Hard Evidence out. I think this card sucks, but that's just me. Mental Note in. Mental Note is good. I've always thought Trinket Mage is kind of boring. A card that only does something if you have the best cards already. But I guess I don't care about Pestermite. Picklock Prankster. It's okay. You can find Pestermite. It would be interesting to add a couple more fairies for a Picklock Prankster. That's all I have to say about that. Impulse isn't really good, so I don't know. Gosh, out for Treasure Cruise. Sure. Snap out for Venser. Apparently everyone hated Snap. I think this card's quite powerful. Lands are one of the best things in Kadish Cube, like Urza Saga or Guy's Cradle or Telegraph Academy. So getting these in twice in one turn is really good. Prankster could find Bitter Blossom? Now you're thinking. Yeah, I could. Could also find Pepper Smoke. If you put Pepper Smoke in the cube, I'd be so happy. Rough. The upgrade from this to Urtai is so big. It's fine. It's just not good. Just enough for Waker waves. I'm saying a lot of the same thing, I guess. Like, Waker is a big dude. I don't love adding another big dude. There's too many big dudes as is. Flash Gorge out for Ayara. Ayara is awesome. This card didn't really do anything. Shadow's out? Why not both? Field of the Dead being cut means that there's just no reason to play Primeval Titan anymore. Wobbles, ever since you mentioned it, Copy Catchers has been on my mind. I've been thinking about it. I just haven't pulled the trigger yet. We'll see if Bazaar gets there. Jadar out. I love Jadar. It's so good. Here's the thing, like, both of these cards are pretty weak, ultimately, right? I think Jadar is pretty good, but I think they're both pretty weak. There are kinds of cards where having two of them in makes them both much better, right? So having either of these in is okay. Having both of them in, they become much more interesting. Because you can have consistently two in the same deck, right? Like both these are good with Skull Clamp, they're good with Sacrifice things, and you have a certain density of them, then those effects become much more reasonable to use. Otherwise, the cards are okay, but they're never spectacular. So, like, cutting one for one isn't really going to accomplish that. Ritual out. See you later. For Dog Detective. I think this card's cool. It looks like Doctor Doom from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right? My experience playing this card, it was alright. It's not great. Sorvell 2's pretty good for a 2-drop. The second clause is, okay, there's Monarch in this cube, so maybe I'll get it back a little more frequently. It's not an exciting 2-drop, but it's okay. The purpose of having all this Surveil is for all this Delph stuff, right? Imperial Seal gone? Well, it sucked, so good riddance. Gurmag in. This card never did it for me, you know? It's okay. I keep saying that. I gotta find other words. It's just a random beater, and without ways to leverage its casting cost, particularly, I know Ayara's up here. It's not that good. I had it in shortly. And you can birthing. The one thing you could do is birthing pot in Archon of Cruelty, which is kind of cool. Ultimately, I ended up deciding Soul Flare is a much more interesting card and adds a little more possibilities and is one cheaper. I ended up cutting that as well, but I think it adds more lines than Angler. A 1-mana 5/5 vanilla dude can only add so much to a game of Magic. Beseech out for Inverter. I guess if we're cutting Tendrils, then that's fine. I found Inverter ultimately to be pretty bad with the Oracle combo and Jace, but it's fine. This card frequently will win the game as a 6/6 flyer. Tendrils out for Living Death. This card is We'll see. It's pretty expensive, right? I think the game will generally end before you can cast this card on a reasonable basis with the necessary things in the graveyard. Um, some other things to think about, like a lot of the decks that you can play, like a dredge style deck, the creatures are pretty anemic, and they sometimes can't block. And yeah, as Levo points out, like in a normal over the normal course of a game, you probably want to disrupt your opponent, so then Living Death gets a little weaker. With Alter Dementia, this card can be really messed up, but it's any sack outlet is pretty good. I don't know. Is Yawgmoth still in? I don't know. Oh, sorry, I just got angry. Not really, but kind of. Oh, I actually did. Okay. Okay. These are the same card. That's all there is to say about it. It was like this makes 1/1s, this gets bigger and gains life. I think Trespasser is slightly better, but they're the same card. This doesn't have to attack, but it's fine. I'm happy to see Toroko because I hate protection as a mechanic, and this card isn't that good. So like having this random 4 drop/2 drop that dunks on a deck that just contains one color is it was a frustrating experience, and the card wasn't that good otherwise. We just finished drafting Invasion, or I did one draft Invasion, but one of the things about Invasion that can be frustrating is that like none of the cards line up in a certain way, and you have to like mentally pin that this card lines up with that card, and this card lines up with that card, and there is an appeal to that kind of magic, um, but it's also by nature frustrating. And I'm not keen to revisit that, especially in a format where you die very quickly. At least in these old formats where you have very awkward interaction, they're so slow that you can just take a bunch of damage. On the other hand, Pack Rat's bad. I guess with Cauldron it's kind of cool. They're saying you can make a copy of it. People love to play this card for, as like a discard outlet. It's so slow. And then there are sweepers in the cube, and I don't know. It's not good. Baleful Mastery out. What a bunch of bull. I think this is falling victim to synergy. I used to talk about the dispatch trap, which is the term I came up with, where there's a tendency to want all of your cube to be synergistic in nature because eventually that's all you can really work on, and that can be cool, especially for threats and engines. It becomes really dicey when you start looking at interaction, and when you start downgrading interaction in favor of synergy, you can do it, and it can be good and it can be fun. But remember that interaction is like the fundamental way for the player behind to get back into the game. And so if you make the interaction more synergistic, it tends to be slightly weaker, which means you're punishing the player who's behind. And the payoff is probably not going to be enough or easy enough to set up. So the idea here is that we can cast the spell maybe for free if we have a lot of creatures. It seems unlikely in black in general, but it's not impossible. And that you'll surveil too. And you can fill up your graveyard with a couple things. The problem is this card says destroy, not exile. So to me, it's basically useless. The whole point of this card is it's a 2 mana exile creature or planeswalker. Whereas this just makes black quite a bit more vulnerable to me. I'm not excited to play this card. I play this card in every black deck. Citadel out for Shadowgrange Archfiend. Archfiend is a cool one. We played a lot of it recently. And then Bolus Citadel. I don't even know if this is really a Storm card. It's just Bolus Citadel, right? You take a lot of damage these days, so Citadel tends to be fairly weak. But I don't know. Sorry, some of these things I don't have much to say about. I have intermittently cut and added Bell Citadel in my own cube because the clocks tend to be very fast, and then you take a lot of damage, and then Citadel doesn't really help you that much. With Tendrils gone, it does become a lot worse. It is a fun card to play. I don't really get this swap. This card was pretty mediocre whenever I played it. The joke always was vintage playable Night's Whisper. I grew an appreciation for Night's Whisper. It's never an exciting card. The lead says Citadel's good with Tinker, but everything's good with Tinker. I actually disagree in that Tinker's pretty weak these days. But cutting Citadel definitely doesn't help that. A lot of the things, the thing that's nice about Citadel is that every other target for Tinker was answered by Swords to Plowshares. I guess there's Portal to Phyrexia, but that card, in my experience, has really underperformed. So, it would be about as good as Citadel. But like almost every other thing that you could Tinker for is answered by Swords to Plowshares. One kind of jumping the gun thing is that given the nature of these kinds of changes, I would say that outside of actual power, that like the best cards in the cube are Solitude, Endurance, and Bowmasters, because they now fundamentally answer everything you could ever encounter. But whatever, Souls Lost is cool, I guess. Stocktide Soccer has been pretty good recently. Thirst is not a very good interactive spell, but it's at least an interactive spell. So this is a net negative on interaction for black, and I haven't been keeping track of that, though I think we've seen that this is just -1 removal spell. I don't have a feeling about that particular concept, other than it lost its best interactive spell, so it's a little weaker now to be. Quality of your threats is important, but the quality of your interaction is more important. Torch of Existence, Rain of Filth out for Stitcher Supplier. Supplier's powerful. One thing is that one of the best things you can do with Stitcher Supplier is cast Tendrils of Agony. But that's a different story. I think Tortex kind of sucks. One black enchantment, one black, choose and discard a creature card, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. It has interesting implications with pitch elementals. With Squee and Master Death, but the game doesn't function in that manner that much anymore. So I don't see it. But maybe. As it says here, it's good with Insidious Roots, which is true. But it kind of comes back to what I was saying at the beginning of all this, which is like, you never want to focus on anything. And you always want to be gaining additional value by just going about your day. And that's not what this card does. Right? Torch of Existence is diversion from your plan. That could be okay, so maybe it's fine. But you have too many diversions from your plans, then you stop winning the game. The goal is to accrue value while you're on your path towards winning the game, not stop winning the game to accrue value. Massacre Girl out for Wolf Strider. Massacre Girl probably wasn't that great anyway. I messed around with it for a while. It's not a bad card. I like Wolf Strider, but it is... I got worked over by it tonight, I guess. Torch of Existence makes it hard to get Realers. That's true. But so does like Savin's Reclamation and Anime Dead and all these things that are already in, right? Ember Cleave out for Anger. Anger's an interesting card. It's not really a red card. I guess you'd have to have a mountain in play, so maybe it is a red card. I don't think Embercleave was that good. It kind of comes back to the red and white are very similar in that nature, which is like, why am I playing any card that just does damage when I could play cards that do damage and draw cards? And Embercleave is one of those cards. It wins a lot of games, but I basically cut it every game because it's in a crew value while winning the game. Brazen Apprentice out for Anji's Ravager. I don't know. I played Ravager tonight. Ravager's a cool card. Brazen Apprentice is a cool card too, though. I think one thing we'll see overall is that there's a lot of either or that doesn't need to be either or. Arc Trail for Avacyn's Judgment. Pitching and casting this is extremely difficult. So basically this is just Twin Shot, or that can be go to the same place. I think Arc Trail is a much better card. Just does add to Madness, which is alright. Our Battery out for Rootwalla. Rootwalla's much better than Battery. Battery's good with Welder. I killed people with this tonight, that's for sure. I don't really view Dragon Engine as a red card, personally. I guess I'm sorry, I'm not speaking. Dragon Engine it's a fine card. Death Greatest Champion is a very, very good aggressive card. So this is a net positive for red, but in a sense decreases what red can do. That it's notable that this is not Lelia, right? So I'll talk more about what I mean with that later. This is an interesting change. Shrapnel Blast for the main Dansters. I think I'd rather have 5 damage than loot, but Firebrand for Arcanist. Arcanist is ultimately a pretty weak card. It's a cool one. I like it a lot, but it's ultimately pretty weak. Firebrand, I think, is generically probably the second best red 2-drop. So this makes red quite a bit worse. Tribe Scout out for Fauna Shaman. I mean, without the land stuff, I wonder if the bounce lands were cut. We're not there yet. Tribe Scout out for Fauna Shaman. This card is crappy. It's not survival of the fittest. It's never going to be. It never was. The whole point of survival is to burn through your deck pretty quickly. It's fine. Oh, this Crater Maker art? I am a fool for not using this one, because this is objectively the best Crater Maker art. Of which there's only 2, but this one is much better. Goldbreaker is pretty cool in my cube. Hey. Tribal Flames out for Goblin Bombardment. I love Goblin Bombardment. Again, don't think about Goblin Bombardment deck. Just put Goblin Bombardment in your red deck, and you will win the game. That's all there is to it. Notably, Tribal Flames and Shroud the Blast out. These are 2 very powerful burn spells that are being cut. So there's a way in which this really cuts red's reach. Hellrider out for Headliner Scarlet. These cards bore me. I guess that's my quickest way of saying this. It's just like it's a generic 3/3 haste creature that draws an extra card every turn. This is a 3/3 haste creature for 4. It falters when it comes into play. The question of whether or not this is better than Hellrider is interesting. I don't think Hellrider is a good card, but the ping ability is really relevant when you compare these two. And there's a lot of ways in which the falter ability on this will do nothing, and in a significant number of games, right? Like your opponent won't have blockers, so it doesn't matter. But they'll have 1 blocker, and the extra damage you would have gotten from Hellrider is more than you would have gotten off them not blocking. So then the question is the additional cards good? Yeah, that's good. But then you have a 3/3 for 4 that after the first turn they can't attack anymore because they have a bigger creature. Like, we're in a world of 3-mana 3/4s now. So can this card attack past the first turn? Maybe not. And then is this extra card your you're drawing, is it addition to or is it compensation for the fact that you can't attack with this card? So trade off to consider. It's an interesting point. Like this card is more about killing planeswalkers. Is the dinosaur still in? I think it's the best version of that, right? Like you just hit them and the planeswalker. Engineer out for counter a spell spear. This card does a lot of damage. It's pretty easy to kill someone with this card. It's funny to cut Seething Song for Kiki, considering you can frequently Seething Song into Kiki Jiki, considering the triple red of this card, but it's fine. It's a little sad to cut Seething Song when like Atali's in the cube. One of the things you have to think about is like, how many paths are there to your high power points? Atali is one of your high power points at the cube. So how many ways can you get to Atali? One of them is Seething Song, right? You can go like Grim Monolith, Seething Song, Atali. Or like turn, some combination of rituals, like Dark Ritual or Seething Song. It's a little hard to mix those two cards together. Maybe you have like Seething Song, Manamorphose, Dark Ritual, Atali. Something like that. So it seems negligible to cut this card out, but what you're doing is you're cutting a pathway towards one of your powerful cards. And then the result of that is that your powerful cards will appear in more duplicate deck lists, which means that the decks will be more and more similar as the cube is drafted, right? Because now the only way to get Atali into play is to reanimate it, which means that if you see Atali, it's always going to be reanimated. Whereas with Seething Song was in, there's an alternate path to get there, so now the deck you're facing can have variety in the way they get to Atali, but it can also mean that the draft is a little more diverse, right? Like, so if I have even like Elf Seething Song Atali, right? Or I don't know if Lumberjack's still on, but like Lumberjack Seething Song Atali. If I open, let's say I get like a late Seething Song and then like a Lumberjack in back one, I'm in Gruul deck, right? Then I likely would want to play Atali and the 6-mana Cascade Dinosaur, which I cannot remember, Carnosaur, right? So when you cut that pathway out, that cuts a possibility out of the cube, which means that the Atali now is really just attached to these black cards and won't appear in really many decks but the black deck. This is kind of how Reanimator has too many bombs, because the number of ways to get to them is culled. Right? That's why it's interesting for me to have Goblin Engineer, because when you have Goblin Engineer, that means like I'm really looking for artifact creatures, and there's other pathways to get to artifact creatures, right? There's like Tinker, not in this cube, but like you arguably could have Metalworker. I think it's not good, but it would be defensible to say Metalworker is an alternate path to get these big creatures, or like Mana Vault and Vault Key. Like Mana Vault Key, just generate a bunch of colorless mana, even Channel. I don't love Channel, but it's just these are alternate paths towards getting towards these big creatures. And when you cut them out, you strand these big creatures, and you just make it so the same Reanimator deck appears over and over and over. Which I think is emblematic of the problems of the Magic Online Vintage Cube over the last couple of years. Pirate Spellbomb out for Lava Dart. Sure. Lava Dart has kind of underperformed for me, but it's fun for sure. Metamorphose out for Monstrous Rage. One thing about these two cards is that really the Monstrous Rage frequently wants to have Metamorphose in the deck, so cutting it does hurt a bit. This is just a strict upgrade, because this card is not very good, and then this is a 4/4 trample for 4, which is just a fine card with other text. A lot of times this is a 4/4 trample for 4 and nothing else. That's just the way it goes. Aether Spellbomb out for Reckless Charge. I've been Reckless Charging, I don't know, last 6 months or so. It's a great card. And Aether Spellbomb's You know what this means, though? Not to be cryptic about it, but like over the last two iterations, Seal of Removal, Snap, and Aether Spellbomb have been cut. Venser has been added, but that card costs 4 mana, right? So how is blue going to touch the board? I don't know if it is, right? It seems very hard for blue to interact with the table now. So to me, that makes blue a lot worse. Mystic Forge out for Splinter Twin. I guess we already talked about Twin, huh? It's pretty bad. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. Well, they're out for a Squee. This isn't really a red card to me. I guess that's my first thought. It's a colorless card. But this is not like that egregious of a change, I suppose. So Zealous Conscript is interesting because it's just a good card. And it's pretty much always worth 5 mana, which is really weird for a 3/3, but it does win a lot of games you wouldn't imagine it winning. And it's, of all of the cards for Splinter Twin, it's the good one. Glorybringer felt unnecessary for a while now. So that's fine. They're kind of similar cards, right? They're a 5 mana haste value creature. Zealous Conscript's in a lot of ways not really a value creature, but it frequently wins the game, so they're kind of similar, right? Grazer for Basking Rootwalla. Lands are gone, it's madness cards, it's fine. Reservoir was just bad in general, so adding anything over it's fine. Tim, we've been going over the changes for a while. I will try to clip this at some point, probably tomorrow. And then you can check it out. Yeah, Planeswalkers, Conscript stealing a Planeswalker is cool. I think Planeswalkers die pretty fast these days. So it just happens less often. I mean, I cast Become Immense a lot tonight. It's a good card. The Mighty. This is like Superman dying. Well, I shouldn't skip ahead. I already talked about Berserk. I won a lot of games with it tonight. It's, if you think about this card as being equal to Ancestral Recall, you will be about accurate in your estimation. Sage was unnecessary at this point in time, so it's fine to cut it. The body wasn't good anymore. I think it's better than Manglehorn, which is M, but that's fine. How the Mighty Have Fallen. For what it's worth, Garruk is always good. This is one of the best design cards of all time. And it's still good. It's because of the way it scales with lands, because of the fact that it's a 2-mana Planeswalker, which is unreal, right? And do you have any work you put into this? I did not change the list. A lot of these changes are referencing and coming from my cubes. I did not directly consult. So Garruk Wildspeaker scales with the power of lands in the format. Garruk's too pure. It's great with Academy, it's great with Curator, it's great with Workshop, it's great with Urza Saga. Too good for his time? Almost certainly. So I guess at that point, it's maybe not perfect. Tortoise is cool. It's so funny to switch this back, I guess. Regrowth is awful. And Eternal Witness is like not great, but it's better than Regrowth. Oh, no one tell Chodomon. I haven't seen Chodomon in a while, but I get the feeling we won't see him anymore. Because Kogo's gone. Let's pour one out for former trophy leader champion, Jodamon. Anyways, not to speak about someone who's not here, but Kolo is great. And Ant is... I already said I don't think these land cycling cards are that good. Nature's Claim out for Haywire Might. I would have liked this tonight because I got destroyed by Haywire Might. But such is life. This card, the Titan of Industry, is like a relic. It was too late to the party as far as big green creatures are concerned. Hooting Mandrills is good at being a 1-mana 4/4 trample creature. D-Force Hermit, again, is just kind of a relic of the way green used to be. Invigorate is awesome. Escape Shift gone for Life from Loam. Loam is still dirtily. It's still not very good. But it's fine. Mango Horn, I think, was pretty bad, actually. Royal Treatment, I've liked for a long time. I liked Snakeskin Veil. And I've been a big proponent of having combat tricks. Rip Sakura Trivalve, huh? End of an era. These are very different cards. That's fine. Brawler was one of the best options for a 2-mana green creature. Ricky's very good too. There could be both. I think a lot of this is there could be both, right? And the reason there's not both is something we could talk about at the end. Prismatic Omen for Survival. Survival is very cool. There's the cards that are being added that make it good. So there's that. Dryad was whoa. Okay. Dryad being gone is not that big of a deal. But the 4 toughness is nice. These are quite different cards. It's not like you have to change one card for a similar card, but it's just... Vengevine is, I think, pretty mediocre, but is nice to have around. Corsair Krufix leaving is pretty rough for Fast Bond. I like Ren and Realmbreaker, like, probably more than anyone. I played this card a lot, but it's not that good. I guess we don't have to complain about the old border Corsair anymore. I understand what you're saying, Cybertron. I'll have to drop the cube to really comment on that. I think we're just adding in the Surveil lands. It's reasonable. Especially out for No More Lies. I don't feel the need to have one more mana leak, but Temeshi's not spectacular. We're cutting all these artifacts. But the strange thing is, like, the best cards with Temeshi are Seal of Removal and Parallax Wave. So it's not really related to artifacts to me. Oh, Urtai's gone? Okay. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. I like Spell Queller, but this was one of the best card draw engines for blue, so this is kind of a loss. I don't see what Surveil adds to red-white. I would rather have Needle Verge Pathway. Bivouac is not good. So Needle Verge Pathway is just an untapped land on turn 1. That's all there is to it. Sword of the Meek out. I never liked Sword combo. It's very tough to have 2-card combos, specific 2-card combos in the cube. So that's fine with me. Master Death is just a good card. It's weirdly one of Black Blue's best cards. And it's not that good, you know, but it's like, it's a good card, so it's good to have around. It's really not a lot better. This card looks so bad to me. Well, I've forgotten. You have to have 8 permanents in your graveyard to get 2 modes. Choose 1 or more instead. Okay, so you get all 3 modes. 8 permanents is so incredibly difficult. That means you have roughly like 13 or 14 cards in your graveyard. And also, like, you have to imagine a black-blue deck has a good number of instants and sorceries. So, getting to that many, especially was Crab Cut, hard to turn on all modes. Yeah, and constructed, right? So this is like a 2 mana sorcery speed bounce spell. 2 mana, target opponent discards a card. 20% of your deck, yeah. And that's 8. It's not 8 cards though. It's 8 permanents. That's a lot. I think this is actually the best black-blue card, so Rip Dimir. Candelabra out, which is I like this because the only thing that could use it was Academy. For Deathrite Shaman. I like more graveyard interaction, so I guess I won't complain. Ugin out for Hogak. Ugin wasn't really playable anymore. It still wins in games, but it's very hard for it to be good. And then Hogak is good. I like this card a lot, but Insidious Roots is really cool, so that's fine. So it looks like bounce lands are gone. Hey, come on, what? Okay. Look, I know you're gonna say that this is your card, that's why you're mad. But this swap doesn't actually make sense, right? Because the best possible card to play with Faldorn is Escape to the Wilds. So you know here that I love Escape to the Wilds. I loved it since it was spoiled, and I've always been, I think, the #1 advocate of this silly sorcery. So I understand if it seems that I'm probably biased in my opinion. Here's the thing. Faldorn specifically says when you play a land or a spell from exile, make a 2/2. The best way to get cards in exile is with Escape to the Wilds. These are 2 cards in the same color pair. So this card does function with Madness, which is I initially used this card a 1.5 years ago or 2 years ago. So when I had Madness in my cube, that became a Study in Harmony. And the whole point of it was when you cast a spell from Madness, it goes from exile, so it triggers Faldorn, right? So when you have Survival and you survive all the cards away with Madness, but there's not really that many Madness cards, right? There's like Archfiend, Ravager, and the 2 Root Walls, and that's kind of about it. So like without, you could trigger off of Inti, that's true. Conspiracy Theorist is another good way to do it. It's not in this cube. So the other good way to do it, like the best way to do it, is to have these massive card draw spells. Oh, is it me? No, we played Beach. First of all, who wants to play level 1 D&D? Not this guy. I played endless amounts of Baldur's Gate 2, but what? Not that snooze fest of playing level 1 or 2 Baldur's Gate 1, thank you. I will take Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance any other day, which is a nice game though, you know? Oh man, flashing back to the days, huh? Anyways, this is like 2 peas in a pod. This is the Wolves. If Faldorn is the lead singer, this is the backing band. I like this card, but I have a soft spot for 3 mana legends, right? Ultimately, I think you just need to cut around 6, right, to get this card in there. That's all. Land swaps. All of these are fine tuning. just do what makes sense. So this makes sense with Kikiji coming back. Devoted Druid out for Finhorn Elves. I don't know. Llanowar Elves, Finhorn Elves, Elvish Mystic. I don't want to play any of them, but they're better than Devoted Druid, so that's cool. Though, if we want to maximize Cauldron, Devoted Druid is a fun way to do it. If you have Devoted Druid, Agatha Soul Cauldron, and Nissa, who shakes the world, you got yourself a lot of mana. You come Inskimbu, I agree with you, but I don't think people would like that. Fire Ice after Galvanic Iteration. This card's fine. Land swaps. Ashen Rider. Thank God, finally. It is funny in a sense to cut a reanimation target for a reanimation card, but it's just the way it is. This card is terrible. It's been terrible for at least 3 years. What's funny is if you like one of the reasons it's so bad is because it has a death trigger. So like we go back to talking about Chaos Defiler. This card isn't that good. So is Chaos Defiler that good? It's better than this card, but is it that good? It's not that good. Valky for Carnage Interpreter. This card is silly. It is tough to cut Goblin Welder and then his best friend, the guy in the hat. But, maybe Goblin Welder couldn't afford his hat anymore or something. I don't know. I think the Ready underperforms in general. It's just so slow, so I don't mind that. Fulminator is cool. I like an additional way to attack lands, especially with the bounce lands gone. I don't care too much about like punishing people for doing things. It is pretty savage to Stone Rain someone's bounce land. So I do like that the bounce lands aren't present with Fulminator Matriarch. I don't think Stone Raining and Tolarian Academy is a way to win a lot of Magic games, but it's better than nothing. What dumb? It doesn't kill them the turn you play it. You play this card and then weld in the thing you discarded. Bang. Land swaps. I like Rallier. I like Arwen. Arwen's cool. I hope it looks like this. I know this frame is toxic, but man, it's beautiful. Buzz Crusher's cool. Why not both, I guess. The most fun deck I had playing over the holidays was a Green-White Renegade Rallier deck, so it's sad to see it leave. This one is really sad. Didn't we add Yavimaya? Isn't the only thing to do with Yavimaya have Night of the Reliquary? That's sad. I don't think Night of the Autumn's good. Whatever, I guess. Sail was a fun draw 7, but ultimately kind of not that great. Keenan is at least a fun thing to do. Generate a bunch of mana and then flip your deck over. I don't particularly like having Brindlelight around. It's too specific of a card that doesn't really do enough for 5 mana. And then Krasis is cool, but like I said, I don't know why I want to play blue in this deck. So you just have this weird card that's off color. Oh, Leovold's back. Congratulations, Leovold, you're back. Oh, Golos is gone. Dang. Oh, we're Finn? Wait. That's Foundry. The sword's gone, so why have this? We're Finn. This card is insane. Right? It's like a terror in standard, as far as I understand. But it's 3 colors. So I have tried to have 3 color cards in vintage cubes a lot of times, and just no one ever picks them, other than this guy because they like to grief people. But no offense, Leopold. You seem like a very kind individual, not like this guy. But whatever, I think this card's really good, so hopefully it seems sway. I think when I say I, it's kind of like that's a really Peggy Bundy sentence. Not Peggy Bundy, sorry. Peggy Hill. Very different Peggy, right? It's kind of Peggy Hill. I think where Finn is good. Well, yeah, it is. Hearse out for Cauldron. Cauldron's much more powerful. I would prefer both. We don't live in that world. Helm of Awakening out. You're cut. No storm anymore. It's very easy to win with Alter Dementia. It's kind of like Falter, at minimum, right? They just that's all. Like it either turns your board that can't connect into lethal mill, or mills yourself, or mills your opponent out. It just does a lot. It's tight. Okay, it's tight now for Emrakul the Promised Land. Is Flash Cut. Okay. I like Emrakul the Promised Land. It's a neat card. I found it difficult when I had this card in my cube recently for a while. I just found it so hard to cast because like the deck that mills itself also exiles its own graveyard, and so it was frequently very difficult to get this low enough in price to reasonably cast because I'm eating my own graveyard with Hooting Mandrills, with Common Mancer, with Helgak, with Judge Cruz, whatever it may be, or my graveyard's not in the graveyard anymore. So it seems like it makes sense, but in functionality, it's pretty poor. I think Sir Ginger was a nice aggressive piece, but that's not really a necessary card. Hollow One, I think, is pretty close to unplayable. It's just so hard to make it work. Consider the number of free 4/4s you get for doing nothing, right? With Gut, for just playing the game, you get a free 4/1 menace creature. Talisman out from Mindstone. I hate all of these, so I don't care. Valakut out for Mutagenic Growth. Manifold Key for Underworld Cookbook. Seascape Level Air for Ulamog. All pretty negligible changes, right? So what can we say in total? Black's interaction is worse. Blue's interaction is worse. There's +1 or 2 graveyard interaction pieces, right? Am I wrong on that? I think it might be neutral. I thought I remember there being +1. Blue's interaction is a lot worse. Like, it loses, over the course of the last 2 updates, it loses Treachery, Seal of Removal, Snap, and Aether Spellbomb. So earlier I said there's like a lot of switches where I would like both rather than either or. The reason that can't be done is because an adherence to a caliber of card that is considered uncuttable. Those cards include the following: Parallax Wave, Archon of Cruelty, Atraxa, Gut, Broadside Bombardiers, Minsc and Boo, Palace Jailer. I hate to say, like, Fourth Aerlingus, I hate to say it, but like a lot of the commander cards. I don't want to be a commander hater. I think there's plenty of great designs in the commander decks, and I don't even think those cards are necessarily problematic. But when they like, it's Is gentrification the right word to use? I don't want to get too much into the political spectrum of things, but like there's this slow growth of power centers in the cube over the years, and they will appear, be popular, be considered uncuttable, and then they will slowly take over the cube. And those cards are almost all 3 or 4 mana threats that generate value, or a large creature that can be cheated into play and effectively end the game immediately. And so you have to wonder then, like, why would I want to do something else? Because those strategies are so powerful. So we can look at these archetypes moving around, but it's very noticeable that none of these cards are on the same level as Bombardiers, or on the same level as Gut, or even like Showdown of the Skulls, or things like that. So one has to wonder then, like, to what degree is it worth messing around with this stuff as a drafter? I'm not saying as a designer, I'm saying as a player. To what degree should you play with this stuff? I think you would be rewarded if you played with it in the way I spoke about earlier, which is if you're free rolling all of your value, it's never bad. If you begin to think of yourself like I am playing a dredge deck, you're probably setting yourself up for failure. If you happen to be a Rakdos deck that has Griselbrand and Archon, you probably have some discard outlets, so you should probably play Onyx Ravager. You should probably play Blazing Root Wallet just because it's free. So it's going to be difficult to rival the power of these 3 mana threats. And with the presence of Ancient Tomb, Lotus Petal, of course, like Mana Crypt and Soul Ring and so on, the game is going to compress more and more to early turns of the game, and is going to be dominated by Reanimator and Naya. And that's my strategic position on this. I think the best possible cards to draft will continue to be the elementals outside of actual power, because of everything. Like, if we think about the number of ways to lose in the cube, only things have been taken away, right? We could talk about number of lanes being added as far as archetypes or concepts or like methods of generating value or aggressive plans, things like that. But they don't fundamentally add a new way to win the game. So that means with the loss of Storm, that there's one fewer way to lose the game, which means that if you can narrow down the answers you need to not lose, then you can pretty much make yourself not indestructible. You can always lose the game when Black Lotus is involved, but you can narrow your weaknesses down to a point where you can control them pretty easily. So that means draft Solitude, that means draft Endurance, that means draft Bowmasters to fight Draw 7s, even though Draw 7s to me looks just to be like a Bowmaster Shieldred, a Hull Breacher deck at this point. So that's my perspective on trying to win. I think in the long run, because the kinds of cards that are designed today are almost always in the style of a standard card, which means they typically are 3 or 4 mana value engines. I love those cards. Those are my favorite cards personally. But because that's like the vast majority of what's designed, then the queue will move more and more in that direction, and then the fact that they don't design cards that are iconic of old Magic, like rituals, like show and tell style of cards, like these huge payoff combo cards that don't affect the board in any way, because those are no longer designed. There's just nothing being added to support these kinds of decks. Now, I think it's possible to play hybrid decks, and in fact, that's what I would always advocate, that you should try to have the perfect mixture of every kind of value. But um, at some point, it does begin to, you do begin to ask the question, like, Broadside Bombardiers, well, the Gut does 14 damage in 2 turns for 3 mana. Can you really do much better than that? And the answer is not really. You need like 1 creature to attack and 1 thing to sacrifice, and that card does 14 damage. Right? Yeah. So I feel like there's a common crossroads. That's my opinion. What do you all think? Any opinions? It's not to say that there's some cards I won't enjoy playing with. Cleans up Gut. You'll be dead before you can set the forest on fire, Mark. Those skeleton assassins, they're so stealthy. So like the other avenue is to add initiative and to add that stuff. But isn't that what I just said, which is like it's just more 3 and 4 mana value engines? I don't really have a personal problem playing with those cards. I do think they get repetitive, so that is ultimately negative. But I know a lot of you in the chat don't like to play with them, and I totally understand why. Because again, they're repetitive and they really push board presence in a way that drives the game in a singular direction. 1 mana initiative, yeah. The game does have theoretical barriers, right? Like I always kind of say. Yeah, I mean, Leovold, initiative versus cheats, and both of those are ways to avoid playing the game. I it, that's a longer conversation, I suppose, but the thing that's compelling to me about access to the entire card pool and access to these fast mana and these older cards in particular is the ways in which you can kind of smash the atom of the game and break it in a way that gives you true control. And I think that particularly enter the battlefield value cards um, take control away from you as a player, even though they let you win the game or whatever it may be. They let you control the game in a strategic standpoint, but they take control away from you in a sense of agency and ability to assert yourself, right? I mean, I could go on a long tirade about how like Necrotal stole the game of Magic away from Magic players. And then the Titans like really, really stole the game away from Magic players. ECB value has a very important role in the game, and it's necessary for particularly kind of interactive things that like non-creature interaction, like destroying artifacts or enchantments, is valuable for destroying lands with lesser degree, like affecting the graveyard, but affecting creating more permanence and then like killing your opponent's creatures. It's a dangerous game because you quickly enter in the space where you it's like a package deal, right? Like you order this thing and then you get the whole package rather than you uh, it could be like comparing ready to wear clothes with bespoke tailoring, right? Any fashion heads out there? Undercity is almost Shahrazad. I get what you're saying. It's a sub game. I think sub games can be okay. I follow Mansory guy. I do. It's an interest. I find that Magic players love sweet plays, but they also love to win the game. And a lot of sweet plays don't usually lead to winning the game that often. This gets into like more personal frustrations, but so what will the cube be like? It'll be okay. There are some things you can do. I do think you probably be punished ultimately for doing them. To me, the more this word is around, the worse Magic is. I guess that's like my mission statement. Any other? So Mark says recent cube changes are effectively doubling down rather than and cutting away the bad things. Well, I think all of these things work. I think they can all work in the same place. It's difficult to do that though if a certain number of slots have to be held for the maximum power cards. I think there's a reckoning at some point between I want to play with the most powerful cards and I want to play a fun game of Magic, you know? Everyone's definition of fun is like a different thing, you know, but I usually kind of put the clamps to people. That's not a good sentence, you know. I usually kind of put the screws to people who say, well, fun is subjective because it's your job to figure out what is fun and then make something that creates that, you know, but as far as cutting things that don't work, I think there's a time and a place where things have to go, but I think they can also be rejuvenated. One of my personal missions for the last couple of years has been to rejuvenate like old cards. I know Fastbond has been some people's favorites for a long time, but there was like a point 2 years ago where I just said I want Fastbond to be a first pickable card, and I don't think it was, you know, but I found some stuff that I thought made it first pickable, you know, like the whole Valakut Exploration, and Bounce Sands, and Hedron Crab, and you know, some of that stuff was collaborative in nature, but we could talk about the 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 paradoxes involved in most powerful Magic cards, right? Yeah, I feel like to a degree, ultimately, what you're saying is rather than present things that could work or other options that could work, there's just a reduction, right? Yeah. But I also am a firm believer that the mentality of decks makes cube worse, and that there's no reason to bring the mindset from constructed into cube because it doesn't work that way. Like, and the more we think about cube as 10 decks shuffled together, the less exciting it is, and the more repetitive it is. Anytime I see the word support, I'm like, I don't know, I don't like that word. But I have like a lot of personal pet peeves about language in general. I try to use my own vocabulary because I want to say specifically what I want to say, right? And there's too much connotation and baggage with words a lot of the time. Not a very helpful way to communicate sometimes, but I think it's more specific in what I want, you know? I guess that's kind of what I have to say. Well, that is it for tonight. I'll be around tomorrow night. I might be busy earlier in the evening. I might be busy earlier in the evening on Thursday. I don't know how often I'm going to stream. I always say that, and then I stream all the time. But we'll see. I've got some other things I should work on too. I always say that, and then I don't do them. I just stream. But as always, it's really fun to hang out with everyone and talk. So thanks for hanging out. See y'all.